Today we've got a story about growing up with money, experiencing tough times with money, and making it back. We've got Barbara Huson on the show.
You wire your brain by what you focus your attention on. When you take your attention away from that negative thought and start focusing on the positive one, that old neural pathway starts shriveling up and weakening, and the new neural pathway starts getting stronger and stronger.
Welcome to the Inspired Money Podcast, where we explore positive money stories. I'm Andy, your host and financial advisor at Runnymede Capital Management. Together, let's shift our perspectives on money so we can make more and give more to make the world a better place. If you want to do better with your money, hit like. The Inspired Money channel appreciates you. We've got financial therapist and wealth coach Barbara Huson on the show. And man, does she have great stories. Her dad was the R of H&R Block. Her ex-husband gambled away their inheritance, which forced Barbara to improve her relationship with money and learn how to manage it like a boss. She not only mastered her financial future, but helping others became her calling. In this episode, you'll learn having money, not having money, and coming back. The complexities of communicating about money with family members. We're talking multi-generational money conversations. And stick around to the end to hear how principles of neuroscience can apply to your money. Now let's get inspired with Barbara Huson. Barbara, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
My earliest childhood memory of money, and I know this very well because it is when I must have been 3 or 4 years old, and I'm on this little step stool and I'm brushing my teeth, and my mother's standing next to me. And I take the toothbrush out of my mouth and I turn to my mom and I ask her how much money she has. And my mother looks at me. She doesn't say a word, but she gives me this look that only my mother can give, with her lips tight. And the message I got so clear was, don't talk about money. You're a bad girl if you talk about money. And that memory, because our earliest memory is very indicative of early decisions we've made. And that I remember that because of that, I was married to a man who was I was from a wealthy family and I had an inheritance. And I was married to a man who was a stockbroker, but he was a compulsive gambler. And I continued to let him manage the money for 15 years of our marriage because I didn't understand it. I was intimidated, but I never told anyone, including a therapist I was going to twice a week. I never told anyone that he was gambling the money away. I never told anyone I was having money problems. I never talked about money.
Wow. That's heavy.
It was very heavy. But you asked that question because you know about Alfred Adler's work, the psychologist. So Alfred Adler was a student of Freud, and he started individual psychology, is what he called it, a school in the 1800s. And one of his teachings was our earliest memory of all the memories that you remember, of all the myriad of memories, the one you remember is in that moment you made a decision that became unconscious, but that one decision will completely control you unless you understand it.
And you trace yours back to brushing your teeth.
To my mother. It wasn't just brushing my teeth.
Right,
it was
but at that moment.
It was my mother's reaction to, you never talk about money.
Aside from that, I understand that you had a very comfortable upbringing. Money was not in short supply, but you was that the last discussion that you had about money with your mom, like growing up for a long time?
Oh yeah. I mean, I would ask my dad, who was the founder of H&R Block, who helped people with their finances. I would ask my dad about money. And whenever I asked him, he would always say, don't worry, don't worry. because under that was the assumption there'll always be a man to take care of you, and that my father really believed that. And my man took care of me, but not in the way he thought. But yeah, we never talked about money, never.
Okay, yeah, I want to get. I wonder if you can take us back to those earlier days, because that don't worry attitude about money, I guess, can be good, but
no, it's not. It's good. You shouldn't worry.
It can feel good.
I understood what he was saying, because we were once, the two of us, when one of my books came out, I think it was my first book, we were on a radio show together. And the radio host asked my father, why'd you give her that advice not to worry? And he very lovingly said, I just didn't want my girls to ever worry. It never occurred to him, because he was of that generation, that there would always be a man to take care of me, and a man would be able to do it. So he never foresaw that I would marry a compulsive gambler. But I mean, it came from a loving place, and I understand he didn't want to worry, but money is very important to understand.
So with that don't worry also comes a lack of education, a lack of understanding money.
It comes with everything. I mean, I remember right before my father died, maybe it was a year or two before he died, he was very ill. And I remember going to my mother and saying to her, do you know what Dad has planned for you? And she said, oh yeah, I know, everything's fine. And I said, well, tell me what he has planned. She goes, oh no, everything's fine. So I was very nervous to do this. I took her in to my father's study where he was sitting. And I said, Dad, I want you to tell Mom what you have planned for her. And do you know he had nothing planned? He had nothing. My sisters and I had to find an estate lawyer to create a financial plan. We had to find a CPA. We had to find all these people to help her after my father died. It never occurred to him.
So was he able to set things up before his passing? He was.
Yeah. It was beautiful. So when it was set up so beautifully, and I think it's so important for couples to have this discussion. It's a scary discussion. It's an uncomfortable discussion. While we were talking, I was so nervous. When I get nervous, I scratch my wrist. My wrist was bleeding. But it was an important discussion, because when my father died several years later, my mother, everything was signed, everything was in place. All she needed to do was grieve.
Is that something that you teach people? Because you are known as a financial coach, as a wealth coach. I think that that's a difficult conversation for many people to have, to get one, to have it with their parents, but also it's like for your mom with your dad and having that discussion. Like, what is your plan? What have you done? What do you need to do? Those are conversations that a lot of people want to avoid.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people want to avoid, and it's hell. It puts them in hell because not only have they lost someone they love, but their finances are a mess. And it's an excruciating time, and it's a horrible time to have to make those important decisions. So I feel very blessed that I had the courage to do that. And I certainly encourage everyone to have those discussions with their spouse, with their parents. It's so important. I think we need to take money out of the forbidden fruit category and start talking about it. And that's what prompted me to write my first book 25 years ago. Is because we need to talk about money.
That was Prince Charming Isn't Coming?
That was my first book. Prince Charming Isn't Coming, How Women Get Smart About Money. Yes, because I learned the hard way that Prince Charming isn't coming. But I say, we can still have our prince. We just need to change the job description. He's no longer our rescuer or our savior. He is our partner.
Well, in your case, it seems like given your upbringing and given your attitude towards money or what you were taught about money, you did the right thing. You married a stockbroker. You married a professional who should be capable of managing your family finances. But unfortunately, he had a gambling issue. How did it feel to have $1 million tax bill that was not of your doing?
So right after we got divorced, I decided money's not my thing. I do not want to deal with money. And I really didn't, because I didn't understand it. But I feel like the universe had different plans for me. And that's when I got this tax bill for way over $1 million. It was almost 2 million. And my ex had left the country. I did not have anywhere close to $1 million. I mean, not even close. And my father wouldn't lend me the money. I remember on the phone, I said, what am I going to do? I don't have the money. What am I going to do? And he said, learn to live on less. And that was a very cruel thing of him to say, but I have to tell you, I have since thanked him so much for not lending me that money. I have thanked him. I even thanked my husband, who is still gambling. Still gambling. I don't know where he's getting his money, but I thanked him because it was that moment I knew I had to get smart. I had 3 children. They were young. I was not going to raise those girls on the street. So that forced me to get smart. And what I did, I mean, I panicked. I panicked. But then I knew I had to do something. And I want to tell you, one thing I know for sure, getting money is not that complicated. I mean, there's a whole industry out there that wants to convince you otherwise. But it's so simple. It doesn't take a lot of time to get smart. It doesn't take a lot of money to create wealth. And it's never, ever, ever too late to begin.
During this pandemic time, many people have faced difficult financial situations, losing a job, not being able to work the number of hours that they did previously. Going back to that time in your life, how was it that you were not completely overwhelmed to the point of paralysis? Like, where do you start?
Well, first of all, I couldn't be overwhelmed because I had 3 daughters. One was just a baby, so I didn't have a choice. Paralysis was not an option. It just wasn't. I think what I did when I look back, I worked on 2 levels. I read books, I went to classes, I did all the things you're supposed to do, right? My eyes would glaze over, my brain would fog up. I just feel terminally stupid. What I realized, it's not enough for some of us who didn't pop out of the womb understanding money. That it's not just the outer work, the practical stuff. There's also the component of the inner work. And I remember I went to a therapist at the time. I went to a counselor. And I remember sitting there and I sat down and I said to him, Daniel, I really want to understand money. I really do. I just can't get it. I really want to understand. And he looked me in the eye, just directly in the eye. And he said to me, no, you don't. And it was like, I couldn't argue. It was like he took the air out of my defenses. It was like there was a part of me in that moment. I discovered there was a part of me that did not want to get smart, that did not want to take control, that I was so terrified that I would screw it up, that I would lose everything. I had to let my husband do that. I was terrified. I was also terrified that my parents would be disappointed in me. And I was really terrified that a man wouldn't love me if I became financially successful and smart. And it was when I worked on those parts of me that were scared, that were terrified. I remember my therapist at the time, he said, no wonder you can't get smart. It's an act of self-protection. And so it was working on those that it was like the veil lifted. And suddenly I could see put what I was reading in the books. And then it was just a matter of really learning, of going to classes. And I did 3 things that I look back, and I didn't realize I was doing them. But to anyone who has trouble or doesn't understand or needs help getting smart or smarter about money, because it never ends, I still do this. But there were 3 steps. And I really see now, looking back and talking to you about it, it's really the small steps consistently taken that really helped me. And so should I share the 3 steps?
Absolutely.
So what I did, the first step is every day read something about money, even if it's just for a minute or 2. Even if it's just perusing the business section of the headlines, even if it's just taking Money magazine while you're standing in line at the market instead of People magazine and leaping through it, even if it's just reading a sentence or a paragraph in a financial book, because so much of getting smart or smarter is just familiarizing yourself with the jargon and with the current trends. I call it the osmosis school of learning. Just every day you read something. I even subscribed to the Wall Street Journal. And I took what was then section C, which was the finance section, and I put it on the kitchen counter, and I figured by osmosis, I picked something up. So it was amazing, just reading a little bit every day. And then every week, talk about money, preferably that was someone that knows more than you. And being a journalist, that was fairly easy for me. And I started interviewing people who were smart with money, and out of that came my first book. But what I learned is that people are very willing to share. And I think it's our secrecy and silence that keeps us stuck. And so I just started asking people, how did you learn? How did you get smart? What was the best advice someone gave you? What is the best advice you gave me? What were some of your biggest mistakes? And so every week I just found somebody to talk to who knew more than me, which wasn't hard because I didn't know anything. So every day I read, every week I talked, and then every month I just saved automatically. I started maybe with $20 automatically. And just as I could, I raised it. But from every day reading, every week talking, and every month saving, it was phenomenal what happened.
I love that 3-step recipe for a complete transformation.
It was. I couldn't have done it without doing that internal work, without looking at the part of me that was scared. So that's an important component, I think. It's very important. And most financial education calls that the touchy-feely, and they look down on it. But to me, that's a really important.
Yeah, I think it is important because one needs to understand what motivates us and what's holding us back individually too.
Exactly.
Yeah. I hadn't heard of anyone's fear being like that the financial knowledge would make you like unattractive. I've heard the opposite of that, where people say that, especially women in particular, that their identity is tied to the finances. So when they have debt, they feel like that debt makes them less worthy, that they're not doing a good job for their kids, that they are not attractive to a potential partner. But for you, it was the opposite. You were afraid to be empowered with money?
Because I was raised, well, first of all, I'm from a different generation. But my parents really honed in that women do not work and women do not manage money, and that makes them unattractive to men. They told me that flat out.
I think that often...
It was no surprise that I felt that. I mean, I don't, thank God there aren't a lot of parents around like that anymore.
I think oftentimes when people think about money, they kind of think about money like in a linear way. And usually it's because we watch movies and it's like from rags to riches. But you kind of saw like from all different directions. And
I saw it from riches to rags, and I came back.
Yeah.
And I came back. And yeah, I feel like, but on a deeper level, I feel like that is part of my calling. I feel like I came into this planet. I came here with the parents I did and the husband I did, because this is what I was supposed to do, my calling. And this is what I spent 25 years doing, is really helping empower women financially. And it's not just the practical. There's all kinds of internal issues that keep us from getting ahead financially.
I hear clergy talk about that moment that they felt called. Did you have a moment where you felt called to have this financial message?
I think, yes. Yes, it was the strangest thing. So I was a journalist. I was writing for the San Francisco Business Times and other freelancing. And I never wrote about my personal story, ever. And out of the blue, I was living in San Francisco, and someone from a college in Oakland, a small college, was having a Women and Money Day. And they called me and they wanted me to speak. I'm going to tell you, Andy, I have no idea why they did this. But I had just come out of, this is when I really kind of, I got it together. And they asked me to speak. And that was the moment I knew this is my calling. And I put together a speech. And out of that speech, I decided to write the book. And it was very clear.
And I think that was the first of 7 books. You never looked back. You kept going.
Yes.
When you were facing this comeback, when you were digging yourself out of this financial difficult time, your girls were very young. To what extent, what kind of conversations did you have with your girls about money? And I'm kind of thinking about when you were 3 years old and brushing your teeth and your mom had that reaction. Now you're a mom. And how are you looking at your girls while dealing with all of this financial turmoil? Did you feel like you had to shield them from some of that? Or what kind of conversations did you have?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My girls, I had one was a baby, but one was 10 and one was 9 and one was 12. So the baby, of course, she was, I think, 2. But the older 2, I talked to them. I didn't tell them how in dire straits I was. I did not tell them. But I did tell them that now that their father was gone, I really needed to understand money. And I would tell them about what I was doing. And I remember one time I went to see a financial planner, and I took my 2 girls with me. And I remember Julie, who was maybe 10 at the time, she had her head on the table the whole time. I mean, she was like bored. They were both bored. But I think it's something sunk in. But I talked about money very, very freely. Not, I didn't have any, not the scary, all the exciting stuff I was learning. Oh my God, I understand investing, I would say. I understand this difference between stocks and a bond. Just silly stuff over the dinner table. But that stuff sunk in. So what I think I did, now that you asked me, no one's asked me this, I think I normalized it for them. I normalized the conversation of money so that it wasn't something off-putting or something forbidden or something weird or scary.
And did you see that had a positive effect or impact on them as they grew up into adulthood?
They always definitely had a positive effect. Definitely. I did have one. So one of my daughters, I'm telling you all this personal stuff. You're so easy to talk to.
I hope your daughters don't mind.
I hope they don't listen. That's just what I want to. I hope my mother doesn't listen. But anyway, my oldest daughter married a man, and they got in a lot of debt. And I'm very, very, very much against credit card debt. That scares me. And she got in debt for various reasons. And I thought, oh, I feel bad for them. So I wanted to help her. So I paid for their kids' school. I paid for her gym membership. I paid for something else. And a friend of mine, I was telling her, and she did what I called a mini intervention a couple weeks later. She sat me down and she said, "You are enabling your daughter. You are enabling your daughter." And I thought, oh my God, I am. Here am I, a wealth therapist, a financial therapist, a coach. I write books, and I'm doing that. And I remember saying to my daughter one day, "I'm sorry to say this, but the bank of mom is closed." And she was furious. And it was horrible. That was a really hard conversation. We didn't talk for months. But you know something? In less than a year, they were out of debt. And that was years ago. They had never gone back. So that was a hiccup. That was definitely a hiccup. But other than that, they've been really amazing. Two of my daughters, one's a stay-at-home mom, but two of my daughters have businesses with their husband, and they do all the bookkeeping. They do all the financial stuff.
That is great. I want to ask you about your most recent book, Rewire for Wealth, because I just find it fascinating, I guess the evolution of your practice and how you address money and how you work with clients about money. And I was interested to see that after, I don't know how many years, you reached a period where you were kind of uncertain. Like you kind of felt like things had gotten stale and you weren't really sure what you should be doing. What was that like?
Well, so what happened, when was it? I forget the year. But it was kind of like, I felt burnt out. I was working really hard. I was very successful. And I remember saying to someone, I feel like putting a sledgehammer to my business and just smashing it to smithereens.
Yeah, that's never a good sign.
Never a good sign. Never a good sign. And so I decided, I felt like something was missing. I knew I wasn't finished. I knew I was not finished, but something wasn't right. Something was missing in this work. So I stepped back. I stopped taking on new clients. I didn't take any new speaking engagements. I really stepped back and I just prayed. I said, what's missing? And I was very confused because this is more than a job to me. This is like my ministry. This is what I was called to do. And one day I was just online. I was looking at my email, and there was an article about neuroscience. And I read the article. I knew nothing about neuroscience. And I swear to God, Andy, I read this article and I swear some piece of my brain lit up like a Christmas tree and said, this is it. This is the missing piece. And so I spent 5 years studying neuroscience, applying it to my work, integrating it with what I was already doing. And it was phenomenal. What I realized is by integrating principles of neuroscience into my work with clients, I could really expedite the learning curve and really reduce their resistance quickly. And then my book came out.
That's amazing. It was just by like a chance email about neuroscience.
Total chance email. Total chance. I think a lot, I wonder how many people this happens to, but so much in my life, you're going one way and then a chance event happens that just moves the needle a little bit, I think I'm going to go down that road. And that's what happened.
Yeah, I hear about it more in terms of an artist, because it's like an inspiration, whether you're writing a song or you are creating a painting or a sculpture. It's like something happened that took you down a different path. To give us a little context before we get into the neuroscience part of money, prior to that email, you had, like, your work, I know, had like being financially savvy, you had 4 steps. Can you quickly take us through that?
Well, I have lots of books and lots of steps.
Okay.
So
I'm talking about
okay, I think
outer,
I know what you're
inner,
talking
higher,
about.
deeper.
Oh, those. Okay. So over the years of working with clients, and then I realized right away, very early in my own life, that the practical work was not enough. It was, for me, it was not enough. And that's when I realized the importance of what I call the inner work of wealth. And that's looking at your attitudes, beliefs, and early decisions you made about yourself and money, your upbringing, all that. But there's also the spiritual aspect, what I call the higher work of wealth. And I believe that we are all here for a purpose. We are all here. But you can't possibly pursue your purpose and play full out if you're drowning in debt or you're struggling to make ends meet. And it's like, that's, I believe, what motivates, especially women. What research has found is that men and women are very different in many ways financially. Men, by and large, are very motivated by profit, perks, prestige, no matter how much money they have. Women, generally speaking, once they are reach financial stability, once we have food on the table and a roof over our heads and some disposable income, we're not really motivated by money. We want to make more money. But what motivates us is an opportunity to help others, to make a difference in the world. And in working exclusively with women, which I do, what helps them really take the financial reins is understanding not just what they can buy, but what money allows them to do. So that's what I call the higher work of wealth. And then there's what I call the deeper work of wealth, which is the latest component, the latest prong of my process, and that is the mind-brain connection. And when you understand how the mind and brain works, you can really speed up the learning process.
So tell us how the neuroscience applies to your work. Like, where does it fit? How does it all fit together?
Okay, so your brain controls everything you do, right? Your brain controls everything. Your brain controls your breathing in, your breathing out. It controls your spending, your saving. It controls your behavior. But your brain is shaped by your mind. Your brain is an organ in your head, a physical organ. Your mind is a non-physical entity. It's a source of thoughts and feelings. And the thoughts and feelings that come from the mind flow to the brain. They reach those neurons, those little cells that start talking to each other that create these neural pathways. And these neural pathways, the more you think the thought, the more you do the behavior, the more you have the feeling, they get deeper and deeper. And that's what controls your behavior, is those neural pathways. So I realized if you could learn how to train your mind to reprogram your brain for wealth and well-being and whatever else you want, it's a game changer. So it took me 5-6 years to create a process, and I can tell you this so quickly. 3 steps to train your mind to reprogram your brain with what I call a rewire for wealth. And these 3 steps are so simple, but they are so difficult. They take enormous effort because what you're doing is going against a deeply hardwired neural pathway. So at the beginning, it's really difficult. But there's all kinds of shortcuts and ways to do them. But the 3 steps, okay? The first step, I'm going to tell you the 3 steps and then I'll explain them. So the first step is recognize. The second is reframe. And the third is respond differently. So the first is to recognize any negative thoughts that may be causing the unwanted behavior. So let's say you have this thought, there's never enough. There's never enough. And everywhere you look, there's just never enough. Or I'm not enough. Whatever that thought is, you recognize it. But you recognize it a certain way. You recognize it with curiosity, not with criticism, not with judgment. Or, there you go again, Barbara, thinking there's never enough. No, you go, oh, isn't that interesting? I am having a thought about there never being enough, or I am having a thought about being stupid. So when you do it with curiosity and you separate yourself from the thought, because the thought's not the truth, it's just a random thought that you probably thought over and over again, which is what wired your brain. So you just say, oh, I am having a thought about there's never enough. Isn't that interesting? So you separate yourself from the thought and know that it's just been wired in your brain, and then you reframe it. How can you see the situation differently? Because every situation, our reaction is only our interpretation of it. You and I could see the same situation, and you and I could have completely different interpretations. So in Reframe, you change your interpretation. You see this differently. So instead of there's never enough, you go, there's plenty. Now, you don't have to believe it. Like when I was writing the book, one of my thoughts that I had ever since I was a young adult is I don't have what it takes. I don't have what it takes. And so I'm writing this book and I hear this thought, you don't have what it takes. You write like crap. You don't know what you're doing. And I thought, I'm going to rewire that. So isn't that interesting? I'm having a thought, I don't have what it takes. How can I see this differently? How can I reframe this? And I played around. I thought, oh, I can handle this. I can write this book. I can handle this. In fact, I even wrote it on a Post-it note, which I keep next to my computer because that thought keeps creeping back. And I go, oh, I can handle this. So you keep repeating that reframe. It's like a mantra. It's like an affirmation. And did I believe it? No, you would not believe it at all. But you keep repeating it. And by repeating it, it starts to get wired in your brain. And then the third step, which is really the critical one, is you respond differently. Not as you normally do, but as if that reframe was true, as if there was enough, as if you are enough, as if I have what it takes. So you do what you respond differently, doing things that will make sure that belief, that affirmation, that reframe is true. And you won't, it'll feel wrong, it'll feel bad. This is why it's so difficult in the beginning, because there's that old neural pathway that says, go back to your habitual response, go back. And it takes a lot of effort and a lot of discipline, but you do it just for a few days even. And you will be amazed. It starts getting simpler because what happens is you wire your brain by what you focus your attention on. When you take your attention away from that negative thought and start focusing on the positive one, that old neural pathway starts shriveling up and weakening, and the new neural pathway starts getting stronger and stronger.
So because of the recognize, how important is it to write it down?
I haven't, that's an interesting question. I don't write down my negative thoughts. I don't want to even write it down. You could write down, isn't that interesting? I'm having a thought about. But what I do, it's finding what works for you. I think writing down your reframe, that's really important. I think writing it down, putting it on the mirror, putting it in your car, putting it wherever you are, reminding yourself that this old belief of I don't have what it takes or there's never enough, that is no longer true. And I'm focusing my attention on my reframe and I am acting as if that's true.
And I love the respond differently because then you are translating it into action.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. Trying to respond differently without doing the first two, without recognizing and reframing, makes the process so much longer, like years longer, because it's like trying to run a marathon without first training for it. Because it's the recognizing and reframing that is your mental training that prepares you to actually run the marathon, to actually make the behavioral changes.
Do you recommend that people try to work on more than one thing at once?
Sure. Why not?
Well, I didn't know if it was
Anytime.
overwhelming to have too many things
Well,
that you're trying to rewire your brain all at the same time.
well, here's what, when I recognize I'm having a negative thought, like, oh, you look like crap today. Oh, isn't that interesting? I'm having a negative thought that I look like crap. How can I reframe that? You look smashing. You look smashing. And then I respond as if I look smashing. I don't feel like it in the beginning, but by the end of the day, I may not feel like I look smashing, but I feel a hell of a lot better.
I've heard you use the term self-efficacy. How can people gain confidence to believe in their abilities? Is it to follow this process?
Yes, because self-efficacy is a psychological term that refers to knowing that whatever you're going to do, you will succeed. Just knowing. Like I look at my daughter when she started her. She and her husband bought a movie theater. They didn't know anything about movies. They didn't know anything about running a theater. They liked movies, so they bought a movie theater years ago. It's really successful in their little town. But they were sure they were going to succeed. They were just sure. They knew it. They didn't know how, but they knew it. That's self-efficacy. And what happens is so many times when we start to learn about money, we don't believe we can. It just feels complicated. That's how I felt at the beginning. That's what took me so darn long to figure this subject out, because I just felt stupid, and I was sure I was stupid, and I was sure what I was learned, I would not succeed. So it's building the self-efficacy muscle. And because research has shown that 80% in the latest research by Fidelity Investments, 80% of the women want to invest, but they don't have the confidence. And that's what's keeping them from. So it's building the confidence muscle. And that comes, I believe, at least I've seen with all the clients I've worked with, it really builds that confidence muscle.
You've worked with so many women and helped them through that. Any advice? I have 2 daughters. What can I do while they're young so that they are set off on the right foot?
How old are they?
They are 8 and 13.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Do you give them an allowance?
We do. For us,
So
we have like, you have certain responsibilities that are part of being in the family. Like those are just given. You have to help clean up. You need to put your things away. You need to put the dishes in the dishwasher. But yes, then they get some allowance for, doing other things.
And what do they do with their allowance?
We gave them this money savvy pig when they were very, very young that has the 4 compartments. So they're very big on having the discussion about what can they save, what can they spend, what's for college, and what's for giving away.
That's great. Right now, what you're doing right there is brilliant. That's one of the things I didn't do with my 2 older ones, but my younger one, I had 3 jars. And one was spending for them, one was saving, and one was giving. And that really made a difference. And I think the fact you're doing that tells me you're talking to them about money. They're talking about money. They're talking about future plans with their money. I think you're doing great. And of course, what we say is not as important as what we do. And if you're modeling good spending habits, good saving habits, investing, your girls are lucky, very lucky.
Well, during this pandemic in particular, there have been more conversations between me and my wife about investing, to the point where the kids are like, you guys are talking about stocks again? But okay. I hope that is a positive thing for them and not a negative.
I told you when we went to a financial planner when my daughter was like 9 or 10 and she had her head down and it was like boring. But I'm telling you, it sinks in. It's the osmosis. It sinks in. So you are modeling to them. And yeah, the eyeball roll, but you're doing it. It's brilliant. You've got it made. Your girls are lucky.
Time will tell, Barbara. Time will tell. I want to ask you, how do you define wealth?
So I believe wealth is not an amount. It's a mindset. I know, and I'm sure we all know people who have millions, but they feel financially insecure. And I know people who have far less, who feel happy and secure. But my definition of wealth is when you have more than enough and you know it. You have more than you need and you know it. So you have savings, you have emergency savings, you have no credit card debt, you have some investing, you are protected. And you know it. Because the root word for wealth is weal, W-E-A-L, and it means well-being. Because what's the point of having wealth if you don't have peace of mind, if you don't have a sense of well-being around it?
How important is it to have a goal with the excess money that one has?
I don't know. I mean, I think goals are important, and they've shown people who have goals, write them down and say them to another, are more apt to reach their goals. And I certainly have goals for my earning. I certainly have goals of what I want to spend and certain things I want to buy. But I also have some excess money that I have no goals for. But when something comes up, I know it's there.
Now that you've come back fully, you have a very successful career coaching people, 7 published books. How carefully do you still monitor your spending, your income versus expenses?
I don't monitor it. I don't budget. And I don't recommend that to everyone. But I have this set point. It's just this internal set point that I don't overspend. It's just not one of I have faults, many, but that is not one of them. That is not one of my weak links. So I'm very, very, very aware of how much money I have. I'm very, very aware of where it is. I talk to my financial advisor every quarter. I mean, for years, I've been doing this. I'm very, very aware. But I don't look at it to the penny. I definitely don't look at my bank account all the time. I certainly don't look at my stocks all the time. I think anybody's crazy to look at their stocks all the time. That just makes you crazy. So, but I'm very aware.
Well, I agree 100% with you there. I liken that to trying to watch a tree grow or watching the grass grow. You'll drive yourself crazy.
And it's especially important when the market's crashing. The best thing to do is go for a walk. I go to a yoga class. I do not read. I do not listen to. I do not, because the best thing I know is just to stay put, to ride it out. And I have been through, I counted them, 9 market crashes, not just corrections, but crashes. And over time, I have more than doubled my money, much more.
So the tree continues growing. Barbara, I'd like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
My definition of success is doors open easily. Doors open easily. Like if I want to talk to someone, and I think I got that from my father, who was extremely successful. And if he wanted to talk to someone, or if he wanted to be on a TV show, or if he wanted to get an article in the paper, he just picked up the phone and doors opened easily. I'm not there yet. Doors don't always open easily for me. I'm still aspiring.
To what extent are you in control of that? Like, what kind of things can you do so that doors open more easily?
I don't know, because if I knew, they would be opening easily.
Yeah, I was curious. Is that a state of mind, or is that a level of success? What is that?
I don't know. I know I'm successful when I can call up one of Oprah's producers and say, hey, I'd like to be on her show. I'd like to be on Soulful Sunday. And she'd say, sure, come on in. That hasn't happened yet.
Maybe it's a level of status.
Maybe.
Because Oprah or Warren Buffett, they make a call, and one, the call is taken, and two, they're probably going to get a yes.
Exactly. But truly, my definition of success is, for me, is I'm happy. I'm just happy.
I like it. Well, thank you, Barbara. Thank you for sharing your personal story with us, sharing a little bit about your daughters even, and teaching us about money and neuroscience. I think a really unique combination. Can you tell the Inspired Money viewer and listener where to follow you and where to find out more?
Yeah, I'd love to. My website is the best way. It's Barbara Huson, Huson.com.
It's easy. I'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Andy.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? I loved Barbara's stories that were so very personal. We all love the hero's journey that has a happy ending. My favorite part was learning how to rewire our brains for wealth. Don't forget the 3 steps: recognize, reframe, and react differently. I recommend that you go back and review them again. I know that I'm going to be doing that. If you had a different favorite Inspired Money moment, let me know by posting a comment below. For listening to the end, I want to send you this Inspired Money sticker. Go to inspiredmoney.fm/Andy, send me your name and address, and I will put this in the mail for you. Thank you so much for joining me on this mission. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.